I think so.
Similar thing.
Gonna go bowling.
Welcome to the Speculations reading series, a co-production of Dreamhaven Books and SF Minnesota, a multicultural science fiction fantasy group that also hosts a midsummer convention, Diversicon, the next edition of which will be July 24th to the 26th of next year. We'll have flyers on that by next time. Where Speculations readings continue monthly, usually on Wednesdays. We needed to be on different days this summer, but we'll start back to Wednesday next month. With John Keltner Zmersky on Wednesday, September 10th. We can sign our guest book as well. They were placed in this fourth or fifth time in the series. Fourth. Okay. Fourth time in the Speculations reading series by Michael Merriam, whose work you see before you. Novelist, short story writer, editor. Take it away, Michael. Hi, guys.
Hello.
Despite many trials and tribulations, we actually did make it here on time. And so, through no fault of anybody's, just life. So I'm glad to see everybody here. I'm going to read to you some stuff. I might give you a taste of, for those of you who don't know, I'm in Minnesota Fringe this year as part of a storytelling show. And we are actually performing tonight at 10 o'clock. So we're going to do this, probably go to Parkway like we traditionally do. We're going to nod from Eric, and then at some point I will have to race out to Theater Garage. Y'all are welcome to race over there with us. $12 a ticket, $4 for the Fringe button, which is really lovely Fringe button.
What's the production?
It is Invisible People. I have cards for it up here. So,
Say more.
say more. It says my wife is eating a cookie. It's a storytelling show. Has me and Christy Marie Kent, and we basically are working under the theory of we're talking about what it means to be invisible to the public at large and to become that. In Christy's case, she's trying to be, and in my case, I'm fighting against it. So those two stories kind of juxtaposition each other, and we tell, and a couple of you have seen it, I think some of you have seen it.
Very good.
And we alternate. So we were quite pleased when we put the script together at how well the script worked, alternating, because sometimes it doesn't work at all, ever. Force, weirdness. Theater people are going, So, but I'm gonna read something to you. I think I'm gonna read from Dark Waters. I still have a tendency to call it by its working title, but it's Dark Waters. So I'm gonna read you a little bit from that. And then I haven't really decided. I was considering reading something from Whispers in Space, and I might do a little bit of the Fringe show, and then I'm going to try to sell you stuff, and then we're going to give away stuff. We're going to have a drawings for a $5 gift certificate to Dreamhaven, who is always nice enough to host us. And we've got some show comps that we're going to give away. I think Sherry has them. Okay. And now you guys are looking at me like, dance, monkey. Dance. So I'll dance. So I wrote this book, I don't know, several years ago, actually. Publishing is a slow business, for those of you who don't know. It's sometimes glacially slow, especially when it comes to novels. So it takes a while sometimes to get things done. And this is my third novel. And the second one is, which is actually the first one I ever wrote, is this one, and the first one I published, Last Card, which is actually an ebook from a Harlequin imprint. It's actually the second novel I wrote. So this is actually the third novel I wrote and the third one I published, so I'm kind of now. I woke to find her perched on the foot of my Murphy bed, squatting there like some kind of fairy tale bird of ill omen. Somehow she had slipped into my two-room efficiency, bypassing the wards, the locks, and Samson. In Samson's case, it was no real surprise. I knew the big orange tomcat had a lazy streak when he chose me to be his master, and he didn't disappoint me now. Did he awake to warn me to potential danger before it was on me and then turn to defend me? No. He scratched my face with his claws. I opened an eye and he swiped me again as if to say, "Human, get up."
There's a fairy creature in the house, and I desire a snack. She was short, not even 5 feet tall, with pale skin, large black eyes, and a narrow waist. There was a slight point to the one delicate ear I could see peeking out from the thick hair she had pulled up into pigtails. She wore a long-sleeved tunic that sported black and white horizontal stripes. A long, heavy black skirt covered her waist to ankle, and she was barefoot. The entire effect made her look like a 14-year-old goth or a vampire wannabe. I sat up, trying desperately to gather my wits. I could sense my focus piece, a chunk of rose rock, on the other side of the room, next to my wallet, keys, and watch. For all the good it was doing me over there, I decided she must mean me no harm. After all, she could have killed me while I slept. I turned on the lamp instead of reaching for a weapon. What do you want, Miss Ellison? I need to keep her talking while I draw my magic. She gave me an amused grin. You're going to help me, mage. That brought me fully awake. I'm sorry, but I think you've confused me with someone else, Miss Ellison. I don't have a magic wand, never mind a rabbit or a hat. I paused and I yawned. I do know a couple of card tricks, and I think you've got a quarter behind your ear. I reached out, hoping to stun her with a small jolt of magic. Not enough to hurt her, just enough to allow me to get my wits together. In the space between heartbeats, she rose from the foot of the bed with the grace of a ballet dancer and the speed of a striking cobra. The mattress shifted, and Samson stood. He yawned, all snaggletooth, regarded me with a baleful glare before curling up and closing his eyes with an annoyed sigh. He was so damn helpful, my familiar. She held out her hands in supplication. Please, I need a mage, and I could sense something in you. I had met Holly Ellison for the first time earlier in the day at her father's funeral. She was carefully wrapped up in mourning clothes, long black dress, black scarf covering her hair and ears, dark sunglasses. Something had seemed off about her from the beginning. Despite the memorial, during the memorial, someone bumped into her, sending the small woman crashing into me. I reached out to steady her, taking her by the arm as I did. It was the slightest of shocks, the tiniest of magical discharge. She looked as surprised as I, and in that moment, I knew what she was. Her expression changed from surprise to curiosity as she held out a delicate-looking hand. Thank you for catching me, Mr. I grasped the offered hand lightly. The way she smiled set off alarms in my head. I hope no one noticed the long beat of silence that elicited between us in the moment before I spoke. Martz, Richard Martz. Was one of your father's employees. It's a pleasure to finally meet you, Miss Ellison. Your father was a good man and a good boss. I'm sorry for your loss. Thank you. And I'm Holly, just Holly. Of course. Father told me you're his best technician. I shrugged. I have a knack for diagnosing problems quickly. I had never seen any reason to tell Howard my success at repairing desk terminals, personal data implants, and household communications units was mostly due to the occasional judicious application of magic. He wouldn't have believed me anyway. That truly is a gift, she said. Gift made real by hard work. I had not known Howard's daughter was part Fae. I wondered if her mother had been Fae or if they had an ancestor in the bloodline. Howard had told me about Holly, of course. He would tell anyone who would hold still for more than a couple of minutes about Holly. His miracle child, he called her, born to his dying wife, born backward and blue, born with a caul, her traditional symbol of luck and one who could dream true over her face. It was also, according to a handful of newly forgotten legends, the sign of a Fae birth. My magic had risen up before I could contain it, and the electric tingle on my skin as my magic touched hers. I shook off my surprise, pulled the power back into my body. She was not merely part Fae, she had human magic as well, a birthright tabooed by custom and treaty. I frowned. I would not be informing the local magical community of her existence. No, in that moment I had made other plans for Holly Ellison. She glanced around carefully before she smiled for the first time that night, rueful, secretive, exposing a mouthful of slightly pointed teeth. She reached up with her free hand and tipped her sunglasses down, peering at me over them. Our eyes locked, her black orbs capturing my gaze. Another half-beat of time passed until she released my hand. It was a pleasure to meet you, Richard Martz. I'm sure we'll be seeing each other again very soon. She turned to walk away, but as she approached the priest, she glanced over her shoulder at me. She was smiling like a cat that had just been presented with a particularly fat and slow-moving canary. When I arrived home, I reinforced the wards on my apartment, apparently to no avail. I chose my next words carefully. She had something I wanted, and if helping her allowed me a chance to break my curse, what would you ask of me, Miss Ellison? Holly. Please just call me Holly. I would have you save my life. I knew there would be a long story behind that answer. I swiveled on the bed, earning an angry glare from Samson, placed my feet on the cold hardwood floor, stood, grabbed my flannel housecoat from the nearby plastic kitchen chair, pulled it over my shoulders before moving to my kitchenette to make coffee. As I started the machine brewing, I glanced at her. She had resettled on the foot of my bed and was gently stroking Samson. She looked like a child, and it occurred to me she could have been my child had his soldier lived, and she was someone's child. Howard had loved her with all the love in his heart. I decided to be upfront with her. Do you know who your Fae forebearer is? She bit her bottom lip with pointed, sharp-looking teeth. No, both my parents were human. So, you understand what I am? Of course, I said. I took a sip of coffee and regarded her. We were part fairy. This would not be a problem, except that you also have human magic. I only recently discovered my curious heritage. For the last 45 years, I have as pure as human as you and as magical as a doorknob. I raised an eyebrow at the mention of her age. If I had been asked to guess, I would have put her in her late 20s. She nodded her head. I've noticed my coworkers and longtime friends getting grayer and fatter with age and children, while I remain the same year to year. I recently left my position at General Mills before the questions became too pointed. It's the Fae blood. You might look this age for hundreds of years. Except I won't be allowed to live hundreds of years, will I? I took another sip of my coffee. It was bitter with a scorched edge. I needed to replace the coffee maker. For someone who has lived immortals all her life, you seem incredibly well informed. Well, yes, when my father died, I was approached by a kobold. A kobold. He was my childhood companion. I thought I'd imagined him. Stan. Your house spirit is named Stan. Actually, his name is Stanhard. My mother had apparently given him sanctuary at some point, and he swore to protect me. He was banished from the house when I was 9. So this kobold, he explained your fairy heritage. Yes. Stan also told me about the prohibition. It was because of a war over a mixed blood child. She paused and looked down at the table. He brought me a letter from my mother. He was supposed to deliver it on my 16th birthday. It explained what I am and how she hid me. She was a mage who had had a falling out with the local council. I rubbed my face. There were too many questions I did not understand, so I started with the most important. How did she hide you? The letter called it a blood cloak. I placed my cup on the table, careful not to slosh hot liquid into my suddenly shaking hands. I could reach the palm-sized piece of rose rock where it sat. I lifted it from the table, felt the familiar rough surface, allowed my magic, what remained of it, to settle about me. It took longer to weave the true scene than is usually necessary. It had been years since I had attempted working of any real magnitude. Casting small bits of magic to nudge obstinate office machines into working order was one thing. Looking at a being's true magical self and all it entailed, without first performing a full ritual, well, that was another. And I would pay dearly for the use of magic later, but I had to know the truth. I opened my eyes as the charm locked into place. It was a beautiful piece of work. Holly's mother had drawn on their blood connection and the power generated by childbirth to create a nearly ironclad glamour around the mixed blood woman, strong enough to fool both mortal eyes and technology. It had altered Holly's appearance just enough to allow her to pass as human. It was the kind of spell that lifted your peers in awe, and now it was falling apart. There was no anchor for the spell to draw power. It should have been tied to a family member, and the only way it could fail would be if Holly had no family left. Your mother was good, really good. That's a powerful and subtle piece of work. You say she left you a letter, so she knew she was going to die? I don't know. It seems that she saw the possibility. Her letter said she had left me grimoires and less formal notes as my inheritance, but neither Stan nor I know how to locate them. I set my rose rock on the table and took a sip of my cooling coffee. She must have noticed the look on my face because she stood without a word and fetched the pot. Somewhere in her family tree was a fair forebearer, and that blood had come out in Holly. Perhaps her mother had not known about it before her pregnancy. Perhaps, but at some point Holly's mother knew her daughter would manifest as Fae and wield human magic. By law and treaty, she should have aborted the pregnancy. Instead, she had chosen to hit her daughter. Howard knew nothing of this. She shook her head, making her pigtails dance. Not to the best of my knowledge. but I only know what was in my mother's letters. There were things in the letters suggesting I could find answers in her personal writings, but please, the magic hiding me is obviously failing. I don't want to die. She sat across from me, her black eyes hopeful and bright with unshed tears. It was enough to melt a heart. Fortunately, mine had been torn to pieces decades ago. Why me, Miss Ellison? According to treaty and custom, I should turn you over to either the local mage council or the fairy court for destruction. She licked her lips and looked at the table. You'll think me silly if I tell you. I assure you, I have seen many silly things turn out to be true. She looked back at me, her black eyes wide. I dreamed of you. In my dreams, a dryad came to me and told me your name, conjured your face in the bark of her tree. She said your magic could save me, and only I could give him the release he so desires. When I saw you at Father's funeral, I nearly fainted. It was your face in my dreams. I'm no knight in shining armor, Miss Ellison. I'm a tired old man who lives alone with his useless cat in a dingy apartment and ignores the world outside. Most days I'm convinced the best thing would be extinction of all human and all intelligent non-human races. I can pay you. I can pay you enough to keep you comfortable for the rest of your life. I don't want your father's money. I have my own resources. What would you ask of me, mage? I would offer you anything within my power to give in exchange for your aid. She paused and peered at me through lowered eyelids. I could pay you in other ways, if you wish. I looked into those black eyes and found fear. She knew she was going to die. She was an aberration. Once discovered, the greater magical and fairy communities would work together to end her existence. I tried to keep the small grin from forming on my lips. On the bed, Samson let out a growl, as if he guessed what I was about. I picked up my rose rock focus from the table. Anything within your power. She took a deep breath and nodded her head. Yes, anything. Her pigtails swayed as she answered, and I wondered what kind of person she thought I was, breaking into my apartment, looking like a little girl, offering me sex in exchange for magical assistance. A lone tear rolled down her cheek to her no longer smiling lips. For a moment, something stirred inside me, and I feared I might be undone. I forced it down, and I offered her my terms. I will give you what aid I can offer, Miss Ellison. In exchange, if I secure your continual safety, you must kill me. Kill you? Yes, but why I desire my death is not your concern. Do you agree? She took several breaths, staring at the floor. On the sixth, she looked up at me, catching my eyes with her black ones. She wiped the trail of tears from her cheeks and gave me a solemn nod. I agree. I reached out with my hand with the rose rock nestled in my palm. She took it in her own, moist with her recent tears, and I felt the magic rise up, sealing our fates together, making our agreement a binding magical contract. So we're going to skip ahead. So, things are harder for our heroes than they thought they were going to be. And they're kind of in trouble now, and they're kind of on the run. In retrospect, I should have realized escaping the grasp of the Twin Cities Mages Council would not be as easily as simply driving out of the cities. Traffic was light, of course. In the 20th and 21st centuries, all the major cities in the United States had built roads as if cars were going to reign supreme forever and fossil fuel would never run out. The folly of that ideology had led to several international squabbles over the precious commodity, which in turn burned through the world's reserves faster. The magical disaster in Glasgow had the effect of stopping the mundanes from killing each other over oil and focused their attention on the supernatural creatures in their midst. The human mages had bought their safety by providing replacements and alternates for fossil fuel and other failing technologies in the form of magic, though magic had limitations. The people began to turn back to older technologies, clockwork, steam, until the world had become a strange hodgepodge of high-tech, high-magic items like this skimmer, and older technology like the resurgent steam locomotives and clockwork lighthouses. Tall ships, sails filled with the wind, plied the ocean's world alongside the occasionally magical-powered behemoth cargo ship or the nuclear warship. The world economy and society was still trying to stabilize in a curious mix of 18th through 22nd century tech. The wealthy could afford things like skimmers and communication terminals. Those less fortunate, well, if they were lucky, they could find a trade like weaving or tailoring. Fully fiddled with the radio as we passed the exit to I-694 north of the cities for the second time. I knew we were in trouble. By the third time we passed it, I was starting to sweat, looking for an ambush or attack from all directions. I swore, turned the skimmer around, shot back down south, but found that way blocked as well. It was an almost obscene use of power on the part of the council, likely taking several senior mages driving the power of the node and working together to produce the effect. Around us, the storm intensified, and I took grim satisfaction that all the attention they were drawing as they closed mine and Holly's escape route was leaving them unable to deal with the rogue weather system I had called up. Now what? Holly asked after I explained our plight. We go to ground. If they can block us, can't they find us easily as well? She was right. The council had us dialed in and locked on. Once we stopped trying to run, they would be able to deal with my storm and then come for us wherever we were. I needed time to work out how they were tracking us. We needed someplace they could not reach, which left me with limited options for hiding places and none of them good. Holly was not going to like the plan forming in my head. I turned the skimmer for the heart of downtown Minneapolis. What are you doing? There was a slight note of panic in her voice. Something desperate and possibly stupid? Is that going to be a problem? She bit her top lip and frowned. I hope you're not planning some kind of suicidal attack. No, though they might think that was my plan. And if they do have us made, do you trust me, Holly Ellison? Yes. Then trust me now. No matter where I take you, trust that I have a plan. Is it a good plan? I wouldn't go that far, no. In that case, is it a crazy plan that has almost no chance of success but is the only hope we have to survive the night? I gave her a sharp glance and turned the skimmer toward downtown. What kind of nonsense is that? Have you been reading fantasy novels and comic books? She laughed. You don't watch many adventure videos, do you? No. What do you do for fun? Traffic, thicker at the center of the city, slowed and started to back up. It might be normal for this time of day, but I didn't want to count on anything being typical, normal, and not specifically designed to stop us. I dived down an exit to street level and hoped for the best. I used to drink coffee and stare at the wall a lot back before I met you. How tedious. When your love is dead and your nights filled with nothing but nightmares of your past crimes, not much else to do. She was silent as downtown loomed, gray, wet, and grim in the wind chill. I turned the skimmer away from the wreckage of the old Walker Arts Center, shot down the service road, past the chopped-up remains of the sculpture garden. That's where we hit our next obstacle. They had the street blocked with two old Metro Transit hover buses. A group of ragged-looking men and women in front of the buses were armed with a variety of makeshift weapons, ranging from rusty chains to aluminum baseball bats. The fact that the core of the city was being blocked meant these folks were not here to shake down commuters for a toll. That they were willing to stand out in the pouring rain told me this group of thugs had been paid handsomely to provide a service. I watched as they waved other skimmers and cars around the buses, not even paying much attention to the occupants, and it didn't take a lot of thought to know what that service entailed. A handful of Minneapolis police cruisers, polished shiny silver and bristling with weapons, sat parked further down the street in the downtown zone, ready to pounce. I suspect they were there to bottle us up and arrest us if we did manage to pass the hired help. A simple call to City Hall was probably all it took for the council to turn out the police. A man in a greasy-looking coat pointed at us, and I knew I would not be pulling over to chat with him. I stopped the skimmer in the middle of the street, the annoyance of the drivers behind me. Holly fidgeted. Richard, I want you to keep your head down and out of sight. What they can't see, they can't shoot or knock off with a club. She looked like she was trying to decide if I was serious, so I reached over and pushed her head down. She growled but stayed there. I looked back at Sampson. He had his claws firmly dug into the back seat. You know where to go? I was asking my familiar, but it was Holly who replied, no, the Basilica. She started to rise back up, a protest on her lips. I pushed her back down, none too gently this time. Behind us, the other vehicle operators were laying on the horns, growing angrier by the second. Stay down. The last thing we need is some sharpshooter picking you off before I can get you to safety. But the mage priests, they were the ones who helped my father. I know. Now listen, if I'm caught or incapacitated, get inside and find a priest. Ask for sanctuary or an asylum. They have to give it to you. Even if the police are chasing you, though I doubt the cops will follow inside. I really didn't want to get the church involved, but they were our best fit for a safe place to hole up at this point. Richard, I'm not sure this is a good idea. I looked at the blockade. The hired muscle had moved to block the paths around the buses, holding their weapons at the ready. It was hard to tell through the driving rain, but it looked like they might be laughing. In an old movie, especially an old movie of questionable quality, this would be the point where I would race the engine, maybe even make a couple of false starts in an attempt to show my opponents how tough I was and that I meant business. I didn't really see the need for that, considering I was in control of nearly 2 tons of metal and ceramics. I hit the throttle, letting the skimmer surge forward, accelerating hard. A couple of the thugs were either too slow of wit or foot, which was a tough break for them. But the impact and flying bodies did get the attention of the police. Their lights and sirens flared to life as I turned the wheel hard and slung the skimmer around the blockade. The police cruisers moved to intercept, training weapons on us. My goal was in front of me, and I hoped the police would be expecting me to make a run for downtown. It might throw them off for the handful of seconds I needed to get us in the doors. I opened the throttle on the little Volkswagen fully. It tipped precariously as I wrenched the wheel the opposite direction I had been going. I heard the mechanical voices of the cruisers ordering us to stop and surrender. The high hum of an electro-pulse cannon firing filled the cab, and for a few seconds the electronics flickered. A glancing blow would not be enough to stop a high-end model like this one, but with a full squad of cruisers zeroing in, it was only a matter of time. I rolled down the windows in anticipation of needing an emergency exit. The cold rain slapped my face. I swerved around a police cruiser and turned hard left. The skimmer shuddered, and there was a metallic thump. I lost control as the front driver's side dug into the grass in front of the basilica, and the whole machine slid sideways, barely missing the statue of Father Hennepin in the middle of the green. Holly was climbing out the window almost before the skimmer came to rest. Samson bailed out right behind, and both of them made a mad dash toward the steps and toward the doors. I followed as quickly as possible, but was not as nimble as the young woman, my feet hitting the ground as the cops started firing on Holly, who had ignored their commands to halt. The police, decked out in their battle armor, tried to track her with their weapons, but Holly was moving fast, as only a fey creature could, using her magic to vanish from sight. The dozen or so officers then turned their weapons on me. I crouched down, keeping the skimmer between us. The council still had not dealt with my storm. It was a moment's work to call the lightning, even as bullets slammed into the body of the skimmer and shattered the windshield. The roar and flash were instantaneous, and I ran for the steps. Behind me, the first officer recovered, shouted at me to stop, unwilling to fire at me now and risk shooting into the church. Two figures stood just inside the threshold. One was dressed in the traditional black priest cassock with a white collar. The other's cassock was lined with red, and he wore a red sash around his waist. One of the bishops. I hoped this would work in our favor. I stumbled into the Basilica of St. Mary and fell to my knees, panting. A gentle hand on my shoulder made me look up, and I found Holly's worried black eyes regarding me. I saw blood running down her arm and realized that she had been hit. I turned to the bishop, where he and the other priest stood at the open door. Beyond them, several of the officers began charging across the soggy lawn. I plead for sanctuary for myself and the mixed blood woman, in accordance with the 9th decree of the 4th Ecumenical Council of the Vatican, that we may safely and justly address accusations against us. The bishop nodded. And are your temporal or spiritual selves imperiled? Yes, your excellency. If the church refuses us sanctuary, we shall be put to death by order of the Twin Cities Magical Council, without recourse to defense or appeal. The bishop turned to the young priest, and they closed the doors as the first officers neared the top step. The bishop mumbled something under his breath. I felt my ears pop. So yeah, that's a thing. That's a thing that is a thing. So, what do you guys want to hear next? I always do this, you know. I always have one thing I read, and then I always say, what do you guys want to hear next? And you guys never jive to this trick.
Free bird!
Sometimes as y'all come to these readings, you know I'm going to do this to you.
Words.
Words.
Need some words.
We need some words. That's okay.
Aardvark.
Aardvark. I don't have anything about aardvarks.
Were you going to do a bit from the show?
Yeah, I was going to do a bit from the show. So,
Do that then.
do that then? Okay. So we got this Fringe show, and we've been working on this for about a year. Last year at Fringe, Christy and I talked about doing this. We had talked about we had gone to see her show, and I had enjoyed it quite a bit. And she had talked. We've been talking, and I talked about a show that I had done partially done at Telebration, I think it was where I did it, another storytelling festival here in town. And she was like, we should do a French show together. And I'm like, okay, because I'm silly. Because French shows are a lot of work. That's my wife. She's helping on this one again. But fortunately, we're not producing this one, so it's not quite as much work. Yeah, Eli's like, I don't think. Eli, who's produced the show, she knows. So my part of the show is 25 minutes about Michael's journey into blindness. And it was a lot of fun to write. It's not necessarily a laugh-a-minute subject, but I had a lot of fun, putting it together. So I'm just going to give you I don't know, what do you think? The first section?
Sure.
Sure. Sure. It started with flyers. And if you've ever been to a college campus, you know what I'm talking about. All over, there's students, they're handing out things, free coupons, tickets to concerts, various information. As people walk by, they typically give a short spiel, something like, sign our petition to make St. Paul go totally green. What's really in your food? Find out what big agriculture doesn't want you to know. Have you experienced the love of the flying spaghetti monster? Occasionally, people take the offered information. Most of the time, they just walk by. But when my path would cross these hawkers, they would grow strangely silent, their eyes sliding past me to the next person. See, these college kids, they didn't understand when I came down the walk, swinging my white cane with my dark shades on, that I could still see them, that my vision loss is peripheral. They didn't know that I could see them when they turned their backs, that I could see them look at me and make the decision to not engage, that I could see the aversion in their eyes. I also didn't think about the fact that I could hear them. I could hear them stop talking as I got up to them, and then could hear them start talking again once I had gotten a few feet away. But the morning it hit me really hard was the morning as I walked by a group of evangelical students who were offering their information in pamphlets to passing pedestrians, and they all turned their backs and walked away. Apparently, the blind have no interest in their Jesus. Also, if the various other groups on campus are to be believed, the blind have no interest in freeing the Palestinians from oppression, free tickets to concerts on campus, or more information about university dining services. I admit that I was baffled by their behavior. Surely they realized what they were doing. Surely their discomfort when faced with someone with an obvious disability could not be so great. Surely they had not stopped seeing me as another human being with feelings and emotions just like their own. No, surely not. So I must be invisible. Come and hear the whole thing tonight at 10 o'clock at the Theater Garage on the corner of Glendale and Franklin. I'm going to give you a little bit from something a little older. I'm going to give you a little bit from Curious Case of Gerald Elkhorn. And the reason I'm going to give you a little bit from this is because sometime fairly soon we're going to have some more coming out in this series. And I would have read for some more in this series, except I forgot to bring it.
Wait, you forgot to bring what?
Anything like Violet or any of those things.
It's too soon.
Yeah.
It's too soon.
Yeah,
If you started reading it now, you'd be sick of it by the time it actually came out.
Sort of like I hate everything up here, right?
Right.
Right.
So,
This is the thing when you do these. After a while, you get tired of your own
right.
stuff.
So don't read it yet.
This is a kind of a fun little scene. So this is a steampunk-esque novella following this particular one. The main protagonist is a gentleman, Arcady Bloom, who is in Her Majesty's Supernatural Secret Service. and he has been sent to a country estate. There's an exposition party going on there, and there's a threat, and it's all very Bondish.
Oh,
So this is sort of my
Blonde-ish, to be
Blonde-ish.
clear.
Bondish.
Sorry, from the back row.
Bondage.
It did sound
Lots,
Irish.
lots of bondage in this.
Yeah.
No.
As in
I don't think
James.
one person gets tied up in this. I have to fix that.
Michael just lost horse sales right
I
there.
know. It's a shame. Bloom gave the ladies in the parlor a bow, acknowledging their appreciation and applause. He settled into the waiting chair next to the young lady Wessex. Her husband had created a new type of water-cooled repeating cannon that the British Army was keenly interested in for their artillery forces. She was a breeder of corgis. Bloom smiled as she began to talk quietly. Baron de Blackmere's second daughter, Mary, was settled in front of the piano, taking up the afternoon's entertainment. The Baron, along with most of the male guests, and no few of Sir Charles's security men, were out on an afternoon hunt and not due to arrive back at the manor until a little more than an hour before dinner. His turn at entertaining finished, Bloom focused on Tressa. The tall redhead sat away from the other women, a drink held in one pale hand, and her mechanical dragonette curled around her shoulder like a fox fur stole. She looked out a window, watching the children playing at cricket on the lawn, indifferent to both the piano playing of Baron de Blackmere's daughter and the other ladies in the room, who huddled together, whispering and casting disapproving glances at her. He waited until she stood, setting her glass aside and smoothing her tight dress. She lifted her head and walked out of the parlor, heading toward the front doors. Bloom nodded to the young woman who was sitting next to him, happily chatting away about her prize corgi, an animal named Millicent. "If you excuse me, Lady Wessex, I believe I need a breath of fresh air." She stopped talking, and Bloom exerted the aura of charm that was the birthright of his people. His smile gave her a promise of a meeting later if she desired. She blushed and looked away, murmuring a reply. Bloom took his leave, standing and grasping his walking stick as he strode after Tressa. He caught up to her in the hallway, the sound of her shoes on the marble floor giving away her location. She must have sensed him somehow, for, to his surprise, she stopped and turned toward him. "May I help you, Mr. Bloom?" He smiled. "I felt the need for a bit of air. All the perfume and flowers were on the nose after a time. Perhaps I might escort you on a turn around the grounds? I understand Baron de Blackmere has the most interesting topiary." Bloom stopped a few feet away from her. That's my copy editor back there. The door to Baron de Blackmere's study opened, and Sweta stepped into the hallway. She gave Bloom and Tressa a startled look, peering at each of them in turn, her eyes wide, lips parted slightly. The maid cast her eyes to the floor, smoothed her wrinkled skirt with a nervous hand. Bloom noted that her bonnet was in her right hand, and the top two buttons of her blouse were open. She looked at Bloom and Tressa, gave a quick nervous gesture, and gave a bob before turning and darting away like a startled cat. Bloom and Tressa exchanged a look. Tressa snorted, amused that they had obviously caught Sweta in an indiscretion, though Bloom had to wonder why the maid had not exited the room through the servants' entrance. He watched as Tressa turned her attention back to him, looked him up and down as if coolly appraising him. "I had planned to retire to my fiancé's airship until dinner, but perhaps a stroll would clear my head." She smiled, her face warm and open for the first time since Bloom had encountered her. "You may escort me about the grounds, Sir Poet." She turned and continued on, forcing Bloom to rush forward in order to open the doors for her. She gave him a small nod and smile as they passed through and into the warm autumn evening. There was a crack of bat on ball and shouting. "Perhaps it would be best to stay away from the younger folk," she said. She strode toward the topiary, reaching out and running a hand over the leaves of a well-trimmed bush in the form of a rampant wild boar as they entered the garden proper. I was surprised to find Baron de Blackmere had invited one of the court poets to his exposition. She glanced at Bloom before turning her attention back to the leafy boar. "A lesser court poet," Bloom answered. She frowned as she walked slowly toward the next bit of sculpted shrubbery. "Do not be modest, Mr. Bloom. My fiancé has quite the dossier concerning your position at court." Bloom felt a small chill run down his spine. If Captain Sahim might have more information than simply Bloom's appearances at court. Tressa seemed to be trying to draw him out. He studied a bush that might have been meant to represent a large bird of prey, or maybe a buzzard, as it sat perched, wings folded. I'm afraid you have me at a disadvantage. She cocked her head and raised an eyebrow. Oh? I would have thought, well, never mind that. Passing the topiary fawn, head down as if eating the grass, she reached into a hidden pocket inside the folds of her dress and withdrew a small piece of coal. The mechanical dragonette opened its mouth, tail twitching. It appeared eager to consume the offered coal, snapping its jaws, shivering in what might have been pleasure in a flesh and blood animal. The dragonette gathered itself as if bunching non-existent muscles before shaking. Tressa placed a finger on the snout, unmindful of the dark smoke curling up from the two still nostrils. No, not on the dress, little one. Empty your ashes on the wand or the walk. Bloom watched as the dragonette unwound itself, leapt, spread wide wings that appeared to be made of thin metal and leather. It glided down to the cobblestone. Folding wings tightly against its still body, the dragonette shook like a small dog trying to dry its fur after coming in from the rain. There was a clinking noise, and small piles of ash fell to the walk, two either side of the serpentine body. Tressa tossed the piece of coal, and the mechanical creature snapped it out of the air, chewing it with a loud crunch before snorting dark smoke. Satisfied with its treat, the dragonette gave a push, and two hard flaps of its wings, returning to its mistress's shoulder. Most remarkable, Bloom said. My own design, though I did not build it. Tressa ran a finger under the dragonette's middle chin. It leaned into her ministrations. Bloom spared the leafy fawn a glance. He was almost sure its head had been down before, but now it was looking directly at him. He frowned. The manufacture of such a clever device must have been quite expensive. She smiled at Bloom. It was not the smile of simple joy that had graced her face earlier. This was a weary smile, the smile of someone who had survived hardship and heartbreak. It involved an exchange of favors and services, she said. Her demeanor turned bright again in a flash. I cast the animation myself. Bloom raised an eyebrow in surprise and no little respect. Whatever the College of Mystical Arts thought of Tressa Wilhelm, she was no dabbler if she could cast such a working. I admit I am impressed. Don't be. It nearly killed me. She turned down a path leading out of the topiary and toward the pond. Shall we? Bloom swept his hand out, allowing her to go before him, past the large topiary bird, now with wings wide, beak open in a silent cry. Bloom peered at it as they passed. Another 24 steps, they reached the pond, pausing to watch the swans glide across the surface. Bloom took up the conversation again. Well, I admit to having limited knowledge of such things. It would seem easier for me to bond a familiar or acquire a pet than to go through the trouble and expense of creating a mechanical creature. Yes, it would, wouldn't it? They shared a small laugh. Imp? Bloom asked. He wanted to know what she had used or called to give her mechanical toy the intelligence it displayed. Dying cat. Ah, a beloved pet, no doubt. One would think so, wouldn't one? One would think wrongly, I take it. It was a dying stray. Animals do not like me, Mr. Bloom.
Oh.
Perhaps it has something to do with the large gentleman following us. I know I would be put off by such constant company. The light laugh she gave filled the air. Stefan, Tanar assigned him to me for protection. Oh, have you been threatened, Frau Wilhelm? Bloom glanced around, looking for his own man. He knew Chillblood would be close by, but could not spot him. He would have to congratulate his man on his impenetrable concealment. Life is full of threats, Mr. Bloom. The words had barely left her lips when the hairs on the back of Bloom's neck rose on end as Tressa's eyes widened, looking at something over his shoulder. Bloom wheeled, hand flashing down to draw his sword from the cane. The blade swished out, glowing silver, and Bloom moved to a guard position between Tressa and the topiary tiger, stalking toward them.
Could you tell us a little bit about each book? I mean, other than ones you already read. But,
Okay. Yeah, sure.
Can you do it in the order that they came out?
In the order that they came out.
So like the oldest to newest.
Okay.
Not like the order you wrote them in, but like came out. Okay.
Shimmers and Shadows. Shimmers and Shadows is a short story collection with, I don't remember, 21 stories in it.
And poetry.
And poetry, going up to 2008. We put this together in 2008 because I had been selling a lot of short stories, especially in Australia. There was a time when I was fairly big in Australia. But I was going to cons in Minneapolis, which is nowhere near Australia, and I had nothing to sell to people. And so we put this together. All these stories sold to various small press and semi-pro level magazines. Art Cold Springs is a steampunk Weird West novella. It's sort of cowboys meets alien in a ghost town. Is kind of how I described it in Oklahoma. A bunch of travelers, a group of travelers on a train break down in a ghost town, and then they find out why it's a ghost town, and things go bad from there.
And everybody has their secrets.
Everybody has their secrets.
And then what year did that come out?
2010, I think, if I remember right. Northern Lights. Anthology, MinSpec anthology, so this has short fiction by various members of the Minnesota Speculative Fiction Writers. I was the editor of this, and we have another one of these coming out next year. This came out also, I believe, in 2010. Also in 2010, late 2010, Should We Drown in Feathered Sleep. This is a novella set in a post-apocalyptic rural Minnesota up near Bay Lake involving mystical loons. Probably critically my most successful piece. Mystical loons. Mystical loons. I'm just telling you. I love to read from this, but it's been so long. It's been out for so long that I've stopped reading for it.
So I don't see that one up here, so.
It's strictly an ebook. So take a card. Yeah. Last Card, I think, is next. Last Card, Annu Station, first novel I ever published. Second or third novel, second novel I wrote. Is a urban fantasy set in the Twin Cities involving. It's actually two books. It's actually an urban fantasy story wrapped around a epistolary horror novella, if you will, and involving May Malveaux, who doesn't know what her heritage is, and the ghost of the Minneapolis Twin Cities streetcar system, which carries her around. Sky Dinner Waters, the second MinSpec anthology. These all have stories, again, by MinSpec members. Some of those MinSpec members include some fairly heavy-hitting local authors, like Catherine Lundoff, who I saw. Jason Whitman is in here. Eli's in it. Conrad's in this one. There she is. Lyda Morehouse is in this one. Hadar is in this one. Joel Arnold, some other people you might know locally. Rob Callahan, Aubrey Staffen Weedy, Hillary Moon Murphy.
If you want to collect a lot of local authors, these are the two books to get.
These are the two ways to start. So you can collect them all. You can take these to cons and walk around and go, hi, sign my book.
Like Pokemon?
Kind of like Pokemon. Coffee. I almost did coffee because I can do coffee from memory. Coffee is actually a short story that's produced in e-format. It's only about 3,000 words long or so. It's one of the pieces I sometimes tell at storytelling events. And it's basically about a creature, the Nalusa cheetah, which is a Choctaw creature that devours souls. And he has the great, awful, unfortunate for him, misfortune to wander into the wrong late night diner. And have to deal with all the people there. And lots of unfortunately true late night diner color, because I used to manage one.
It's semi-autobiographical.
I used to manage a late night diner.
And the Power Souls?
We're not telling which
I'm
parts.
not telling which part I did there.
It's one of, he worked in several diners, and that was one of them.
It's one of them. Alicorn, which I just read from.
The Curious Case of the Jewel.
Yep, Curious Case of Jewel Alicorn, which is a steampunk nod to Bond spy novels.
It's a sequel to War at Cold Springs.
Yep,
But
not a direct sequel. You have to read both of them.
Yeah.
Bloom is just in this one.
Yeah.
And Bloom will be featured in the next thing I think coming out, A Study in Violet, and two of the characters in Cold Springs are also on deck. Marshall's Stottlemyre and Blinchy are also about to get their own individual. What's next? What's next? Old Blood's Fate. Old Blood's Fate, first novel I ever wrote. Has a very special place in my heart. owes a lot to Charles and Emma Bull and Tone. When I first wrote it, it was this huge monster and like 140,000 words, and I didn't have any idea what I was doing. And I still don't really have any idea what I was doing, but I got this cut down to something reasonable. I'm fairly happy with it. It's an urban fantasy piece. It explores a lot of what is reality and gets into some spirituality stuff.
Set in Oklahoma, where Michael grew up.
Well, it moves between Oklahoma and Minneapolis. Whispers in Space, short story collection. This is all space opera. So if you like space opera, I don't write. I was surprised at how much space opera I wrote for a guy who's a comparative literature cultural studies major. But
That's the one I read.
pretty happy with this.
Space opera's all about comparing.
It really kind of is, isn't it?
Most of the ships run on hand-wavium.
Hand-wavium. I don't really explain how they work. They just work.
Can't explain how they work.
Yeah, I can't explain how they work. I'm not a physicist.
I am one, and you still shouldn't explain.
I'm gonna go with the physicist.
I'm gonna go with the physicist on that. So, but they're mostly action adventure pieces. I get a little more political than normal, I think, in that as well.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah, and
Here and
then
there.
here and there, and then Dark Waters is what I just read from earlier, and it's a near future urban fantasy with some technology woohoo. You know, some strange tech, weird tech, if you will. And I get to blow things up in the Twin Cities. That's always a lot of fun. I get to go walk around the Twin Cities and go, I'm gonna blow that up. Yeah, it's unfortunate.
So, and some of them have more mystery, some of them have more romance, some of them have more horror and gore. So if you're looking for something in particular, let us know because we can point you to which book that would be.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions?
When is your next book coming out?
Don't know. It will probably be the next Men's Spec anthology, which will be in March of next year, is going to be my guess. I mean, we've got a lot of stuff on tap, but we're not there yet. I've got early drafts of the next two of these things, and then I'm working on kind of an ambitious project right now that I'm a little, this is sort of my swing for the Bleachers project. At this point, I figure I'm getting close to 10, 12 years in this business, and I don't want to do things that are safe. I'm pretty comfortable with my toolkit now, and I can write nice, safe stuff and find, nice, respectable small press publishers who would continue to publish my nice, safe stuff. But I'm at the point where it's time to swing for the big one again. I had my taste. I'm using the baseball analogy again, ain't I? So I had my taste of the big leagues, and it was the greatest 15 days of my life, as Crash Davis would say. And I wrote stuff for Harlequin, a couple of things for them, and I would like to get back to that, because there's nothing wrong with being a minor league all-star, but you're still a minor league all-star. Just saying. So that's the stuff. So I have books to sell. Greg has sales going on here.